And welcome everybody to today's Alive Academy. This is Gretchen Jordan. I'm the Alive Association Manager, and I'm joined by Amy Pinger, who's one of our new board members, and she's sitting in as an assistant today. And of course, Nikki, our presenter, and I'll be talking more about her in just a moment. So welcome everybody. And it's great to see a lot of familiar names and faces. So just let me go through the beginning slides. We've got a bit of housekeeping announcements. I'll introduce Nikki. She'll do her presentation. Again, this is about a 90-minute presentation. There's some time for discussion and reflection. Got handouts, and then there'll be plenty of time at the end for questions as well. And then I do have a copy of the slide deck, and the recording, of course, will be placing on the Alive members only side in a day or two, so you can access if you have to leave early and want to watch it later. So just remember now in this webinar mode, you're all on mute. Use the chat for Q&A or the questions, and I'll be watching that for any questions or comments for Nikki as we go. And again, you can see that, we are recording the session, and I do have the slide deck. We'll be sharing that later on. Couple of quick announcements, just a reminder to review our annual meeting, which happened last month. Next month's Alive Academy is all about belonging, accessibility, safety, inclusion, diversity, and equity in volunteer appreciation. And that's presented by one of our members. And you'll be hearing more about that. Registration is open. Our newsletter was sent on January 13th, and that's where you can hear all this great information and get the links to register. And then if you are looking to earn your CVA, your certification in volunteer administration, the date to sign up for our exclusive member study group closes on Friday, and they start meeting next Wednesday. So don't forget to sign up about that. Now, your newsletter, like I said, was sent January 13th on a Saturday. If you didn't see it, make sure you check your spam folder for any spam emails. And if not, please do let me know, and I'll put my email in the chat box here shortly. So now I'd like to introduce Nikki, who is an AmeriCorps alumni. And guess what, Nikki, most of us know exactly what an AmeriCorps person is. So yay, good for you. She has been an educator for more than 20 years and licensed in New York and Texas in English language arts, special education, and English as a second language. She's also a licensed master social work in both states. And we were just talking earlier about the whole certification process. So go, Nikki. We're sending you all the good certification vibes. She's had the pleasure of serving as the coordinator of restorative practices for 2 districts in Texas before becoming a full-time instructor for the International Institute for Restorative Practices. She also provides restorative practices training, training, consulting, and mentoring to adults and high school students for local organizations through her company, Best Southwest Restorative Practices Organization. So Nikki, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let you share yours. And I'll put my mic on mute and my camera off, so you may take it away.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so much for the introduction. I just want to acknowledge that this presentation was originally developed in conjunction with Jane Atkinson, who is the Senior AmeriCorps Manager for Volunteer Florida. And so her and I did this at the May 2023 ASC National Service Training in New Orleans. And that is how I was invited to come and give this information. And I'm glad to be here. So one of the things I just want to explain before I get started is that the things that I'm going to talk about today are concepts developed over time through experience. Some of these concepts have been influenced and inspired by, oops, my camera fell, sorry about that, influenced by Indigenous communities throughout the world. And in order to avoid cultural appropriation, marginalization, and generalization about the origins, I acknowledge that the concepts developed today are grounded in the collective nature of some Indigenous cultures. I also acknowledge that my understanding of what it means to be restorative is drawn from my own cultural heritage. I am the granddaughter of General and Josephine Chamblee, who instilled in me the importance of building community and honoring the dignity of those around them. This was taught to me by watching how my grandparents' relationships with their neighbors led to their survival and acquiring of land in the rural South. Even more importantly, it was taught to me by the number of children who joined our family because my grandparents' house was the place where you could get help and support without judgment. So as I go through this, I just want to do a quick overview of the outcomes of what I'd like to accomplish today. So we're going to talk about the origins and evidence of restorative practices. We'll take a deep dive into two concepts, the social discipline window, which grounds us in the importance of engaging with others, and participatory decision making. Then we'll finish with a chance on how to reflect, how you might apply these concepts with your program or even personally. All right, so when engaging in restorative work, we often start with a check-in question, and I'll give you some more detail on the why as we go on. If you can drop in the chat how you are checking in today. So today I am checking in sunny because it always makes me happy to share the work we do. So if you can just take a moment and drop in the chat. All right, we've got a snowy, good. All right, got a sunny. All right, so we're having a good day. Uh-oh, windy with some fog. Okay, so hopefully by the time, oh, I hope your car battery gets in order. All right. All right, people getting out over their lunch break. I like to see that. Oh, I hope you feel better. It might be stormy if this camera, not stormy, it might be what, rainy if this camera won't get it together. All right, we got some rainbows. Okay, I'm gonna stop touching it. We got some rainbows. Good. All right. Thank you so much, everybody, for checking in. All right. So now if you can do me a favor, if you can find your reaction button and throw up a heart if you've heard of restorative practices before. And if the reactions aren't working, then just drop the emoji in the chat. Oh, I got another Nikki in the house. All right, Nikki, welcome. All right. All right. I see the hearts coming in. Good. If you can throw a heart in the chat if you have heard of restorative justice. All right. Thank you so, so much. So restorative practices, keep throwing those hearts in there, put simply, is the science of relationships and community. How relationships and communities are formed and maintained, how to heal relationships and communities when harm has been done. Similarly, Fauna Davis in her book Race and Restorative Justice says RJ is consistent with indigenous communities. It is relational, emphasizes bringing people together to address the needs and harm to relationships and community. And it can be applied to all systems. You've likely heard it in the criminal justice system, but it can also be applied to schools, families, churches, workplace, community, working with volunteers. And it can also be applied from the micro to the meso to the macro. So we honor our humanity and our intrinsic worth, build and support relationships within a community, repair interpersonal harm, and then look at structural influences on community well-being. As I stated in the beginning, restorative practices has indigenous roots. When we are explicit in its support the use of common language and make sure that we are consistently and proactively working to build community. So I want to take a moment and look at some research around what does it mean to bring people together and spark creativity. So Sawyer's research looked at groups we put together, and he determined that a key element of collaboration was connection, and that sparked creativity, but you had to make intentional ways to build that connection. Also want to look at the work of Breslin. And so he took a group of students and he had them engage in activities. Some of the groups engaged in activities informally, some of the groups engaged in some activities that were collectively designed. And then he determined how creative they could be in solving a task. And he found that groups that were spurred into an intentional engagement activity were better able to solve a task. So one of the things we lean into in restorative is this idea of these explicit practices. And so we have a framework about how you build community and connection. So we're going to spend time during this webinar on the two in the middle, utilizing the social discipline window and fair process. So, but I also want to give you some context on the other two. This is like a crash course in the continuum of explicit restorative practices. So I'll touch on those really quickly. So expressing and sharing affect is creating settings where individuals are focused on supporting each other and experiencing excitement, interest, and joy, and feeling comfortable discussing how they feel with each other. My goal in the check-in was to provide the opportunity for you to feel like in this space, I had an interest in how you feel, which I normally legitimately do. And so when I'm taking in that information, if we were coworkers or volunteers working together, I would take that information. And for example, my friend who checked in sick, I might find out, what do you need? And so not just checking in, but also following up in what people need. The restorative practice and continue goes from left to right. So it goes from the informal to the formal in the way we talk to people, in the way we use strategies. So on the more formalized side, we think about listening circles or restorative conferencing. Often in training, I remind people that doing a practice on the continuum is not what makes you restorative, but the focus on honoring the human dignity of others. That was a quick review. Feel free to email me or shoot me a question for a deeper understanding. So now I want to talk about the social discipline window. Sorry, the fundamental hypothesis. So the fundamental hypothesis says people of influence or people of authority. So when we think about what managers do with the staff, they are happier, more cooperative, more productive. What staff do with clients, they are happier, more cooperative, more productive. What we do with our volunteers makes them happier, more cooperative, and more productive. When community partners do things with each other, they are happier and more cooperative and more productive. Why do we lean into this hypothesis, this idea of making sure that we're doing things with people? One is because the aim. So if you could just take a moment and drop in the chat, what jumps out at you when you read the aim of restorative practices? You can just drop that in the chat. Relationships and connection. Thank you. What else is jumping out at people? Repairing harm. Yes, they're action words. They are things we are intentionally planning to do. Good. Thank you. Because there's a need for community and there's also a need for social capital. It is very difficult to manage, repair, and restore if there is no social capital built up between people. So, like Gerard said, people working together versus against each other. So, restorative practices should be considered a prevention strategy. The majority of the time, we need to engage people in proactive building community and managing tension and conflicts. The difference between proactively developing a plan to keep the staff room clean versus how we respond to a lack of cleanliness in the lunchroom is how we view whether we're doing things proactively or responsively. And so the first example, we've had a proactive discussion on how we're going to keep the lunchroom clean. On the other example, we've just left it up to chance, and now we're trying to respond to some harm or some conflict that has been caused by a lack of cleanliness in the lunchroom. And so that really makes a difference in how we lean into proactively building community and connection. So good. Alexandra, I'm glad you brought up accountability. So when we look at the social discipline window, one of the things we talk about is the two axes. One axis says control, but we think about that as accountability in terms of limit setting or to teach. And the other axis is support. So I want you to think about someone who's influenced you, a teacher, a mentor, or maybe a friend or family member, just someone who's had an impact on your growth, who you admire. And then think about some of those characteristics that describe them. And when you reflect back on the fundamental hypothesis that people are more, thank you, Alexandra, people are more happier, cooperative, more productive if people in position of influence do things with them. This is the framework for putting that into practice. So when you're in a position of influence, you think about what is that accountability for myself and that support for myself so that I can then turn around and work with people to do accountability and support. And so control in this case, again, is not limit setting or it's expectation. I mean, it's limit setting or expectation and not control like we're lording ourselves over people. And this is an adaptation from a theory put forth by Glasser in 1964. And it's also described by Ted Wachtell in the original ideas of the IRP. Now, I want to show you another window that has been developed lately. So this is Vanderlin's relationship window from 2013. And so she describes people engagement with each other as objects or human is proposed. So this window shows that this won't always be easy. Sometimes we forget that we're human and we treat others and each other as objects instead. We think that we aren't good enough or others aren't worth anything. This will show in what we do and how we interact with each other. At our best, we support each other and expect each other to be all that we can be. When we do this, we live with each other as human beings. If we only support each other, but we don't expect each other to be human, then we treat each other like a stuffed toy, an object that we do things for so we feel good about ourselves. If we expect lots from each other, but don't support each other, then we turn each other into machines and we do things to another so that we get what we want. If we don't support or expect anything from each other, we ignore each other and treat each other like dirt, as if we don't exist and we do not have to care for each other. When we treat each other or ourselves like toys, machines, or dirt, we need to remind each other that we're human or we'll never become the people we could be. And so Vanderlin's relationship window really reminds us to hold each other out as people to be honored among each other. All right, so a first step in honoring each other is getting to know each other. So what we're going to do next is I'm going to ask, I don't know, Gretchen, can people unmute? Is that possible, or do I have to do it only in the chat?
If folks would like to unmute, they can raise their hand or they can just put in the chat that they'd like to say something and I can unmute them.
Great. Okay, so let's use the hand function. So I'd like to model this activity is called Stranger No More. And so normally what you would do is in person or virtually. Virtually, you use breakout rooms. In person, you put people in groups of 3. And they would take turn interviewing each other. And then once they interviewed each other, then they come back to the larger group and they'd introduce the person they observed in being interviewed. And so I'd just like to take some time to just give people an opportunity just to answer the questions, then we'll reflect on what it felt like or what you felt like going through this process. So if you could raise your hand and Gretchen will unmute you. And then if you can answer the 4 questions that are on there. So we have, what is your childhood nickname or what would you want to be your nickname? Interesting facts about your background. In 2024, what are you welcoming more of in your life? And what do you wish rain tasted like? All right, so who would like to introduce themselves? Got any hands, Gretchen?
I'm looking for, there are a couple of hands up. Just a moment, let me find those hands.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Me too. Okay, Alexandra. de la Garza. I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead.
Oh, we can see. Can we see her too? All right. Feel free to turn your camera on too if you'd like.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Yes. Hello.
can.
Great, great. Hello, my name is Alexandra De La Garza. I am a volunteer coordinator for Texas Tribal Buffalo Project in Texas. We are a Native American led by the Lipan Apache Band of Texas. What we do, we integrate education for the indigenous communities and also low socioeconomical communities as well. So we bring people out to our ranch to learn about our bison and our agriculture practices. My childhood nickname is Alex. It's always been Alex. An interesting fact about my background, I am a mother of three, and we are all artists. I'm a photographer. My two daughters they're artists as well. In 2024, I would like to welcome more partnerships in our nonprofit. We're There's a lot going on in the next three years, and I'm very excited. What I wish rain would taste like. And Arnold Palmer. Uh,
Thank you, Alexandra.
That's very lovely. Thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you
I
so
am, then we have Arlette,
All
who
right,
also raised her
Arlette.
hand. Hi, Arlette.
Take it away, Arlette. What is your childhood nickname?
Hello, everyone.
Hello,
Hello.
Arlette.
Okay, number one, my childhood nickname is Bookworm because I used to love.
Whoops.
Did we lose Arlette?
Hold on.
There she goes.
Arlette, please start over. I'm sorry.
Arlette, are you still there?
Yes, hello.
There we
Yes.
go.
If you
I'm
could
sorry.
start over. We got cut
Okay.
off.
So my nickname as a child was Bookworm because I read a lot of books. Interesting facts, I am the daughter of an Aruban mother and a Trinidadian father. That's Aruba, Trinidad. And I was born in St. Vincent, the most lovely country on the earth. Number three, what I'm welcoming more in my life is patience. The need to be patient, both at work and at home. What do I wish rain tastes like? Coconut water.
Mm,
That's a good one. That's a good one.
delicious.
All right. Thank you, Arlette. Do we have anybody else, Gretchen?
I don't see anybody else that's raised their hand. Is there anyone else? Well, thank you so much for
Thank
both
you.
Arlette and
Thank you.
Alexandra.
Thank you so much for volunteering and being brave. So now I just have another question. Where do people see using an activity like this with volunteers? How would you use it? And you can raise your hand or you can drop that in the chat, either one that works for you. Intros, good. Yep, definitely intros. Other thoughts? Orientation, training cohort, icebreaker at networking events. A rap session, good. Thank you so much. So the importance of the check-in, again, the importance of an activity like this is that you don't just take in the information, but you utilize it. So if someone shares that Arnold Palmer is their favorite, drink they wish rain tasted like, show up with one the next time and say, hey, I remember that you shared that you liked Arnold Palmer. That's what you wanted rain to taste like. So I thought about you and bought one. And so that begins to build those relationships and the connection. And so it's not just about taking in the information, but it's also using the information to strengthen the community. Good. Icebreaker for training or after a busy time when folks need to relax. Good. Using it as a brain break. Hey, let's pause and learn a little bit more about each other. Thank you so much, everyone. All right, so the next thing we're going to go into is what we call participatory decision making or fair process. And so it involves three concepts. One is engagement, the other one is explanation, and the other one is expectation clarity. And so we think about that relational window where we're treating people like humans. We're making sure that everyone who needs to be at the table is at the table, and people who normally don't get a voice, even though the decision will impact them, are included in that table. They're treated like humans who have value. And then we owe people an explanation, either when a decision has been made or when a decision needs to be made. We need to explain to people where this thinking is coming from. And then expectation clarity. So turning around and going back to people and saying, hey, this is where we've landed. Here are the expectations that I have for you around this decision. And here are some of the expectations that you can have for me based on this decision. And so this concept comes out of the business world. And so the idea, or the central idea of fair process, is similar to the fundamental hypothesis. We want people to trust and cooperate. And so what they've discovered is individuals are more likely to trust and cooperate with systems, whether they themselves win or lose by those systems when fair process is observed. So they want you to know that if you take the time to engage, explain, and expectation clarity, their research says people will take this ride with you. And let me drop, before I forget, I'm going to drop that article in the chat so you can read it. Hold on real quick. Cooperate. Okay, won't let me do it. All right. Oh, I see what's happening. Sorry about that. Okay. Well, I'll send it to you, Gretchen, so you can attach it because it keeps dropping it in my document as opposed to in the chat. Okay. So one of the things that also about central idea is that we want to make sure we're connecting back to honoring people in the space. And so that's the important thing about this central idea of fair process. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so now there is a handout Gretchen's going to drop in the chat. I'm going to stop sharing so I can walk you through that handout and how to use it. Thank you, Gretchen. And switch to the handout. All right, is the handout clear to everybody? Yes, no, maybe so. Okay. So as I walk through this handout, I want you to think about a decision that you are either have made or are in the process of making as it relates to volunteers. And why is this very important? So as Gretchen shared, I was an AmeriCorps volunteer. I came in through a very different process. I came through as a teaching fellow, but I've continued to be a volunteer. And so what happens often with volunteers, hopefully none of you do this, is people volunteer and there are volunteer meetings or gatherings where my voice is never invited. And so I spent some time on the volunteered to be on the library advisory board for my local library where I live. And I would show up for meetings time after time. It would be a reading of all of the information, and that would be the meeting. So I became very disillusioned about whether I wanted to continue to be on this library advisory board. Then there was a shift in director. So we got a new library director. And so the first thing he did, following through with fair process, I don't know if he knew he was doing fair process or not, is he came to us and he says, hey, I need to make a decision about something with the library. I can't even remember what it was. And so he came to us with that decision, all of the volunteers. He asked for our ideas on how he could get this task done. And then he came back to us and he said, okay, based on all of the information I've collected from the volunteers, this is how I've decided to move forward. And this is kind of what I need from you as a volunteer group to keep this idea going. And this is kind of what I'm going to be doing. And this is the process that I'm going to keep you updated on the progress and give you space to give feedback. And so that's also really important in fair process. We don't just engage, explain, and do expectation clarity, and then we never talk about how's it going. But you wrap it back around to how is it going. So you should have been thinking about a decision that you wanted to make or have made that relates either to volunteer or staff. And again, I'm going to ask a volunteer who would like to share that decision with the group. The group will then give some suggestions. And then in real time, hopefully, we help you come up with some solutions. Can I possibly get a volunteer who's willing to share a decision they've either made or need to make around volunteers? You're in the right place to get some feedback and suggestions.
I think literally, over 100 years of experience, probably at least.
Yes.
So, and if you're just brand new, this is a great way to use this brain trust. Please go ahead, raise your hand, and then I'll unmute you and we can talk it through.
Thank you so much. Now I'm going to stop sharing. So we
Okay. Alexandra, who we
Thank you,
already met.
Alexandra. I wish I could give you a virtual prize.
Yes, we could give her an Arnold Palmer.
Okay, all right. It's in the mail. Oh, she's in
All right.
Texas. I just have to find out where she's at. Okay, Alexandra, give us your real problem. Others are listening in, and what I invite you to do is when we open it up, start giving her some suggestions from your wisdom, your knowledge of working with volunteers, so that she can really walk away with a way to make a final decision. Okay, Alexandra, take it away. Thank you so much.
Yes, so this is my first year as a volunteer coordinator. From my volunteers, I've learned that, that you have to create those personal connections and those skills that they have for the volunteers to make that wise decision where those volunteers are needed in that position. I'm still learning. It is a learning curve for me. And I'm now that we're getting into a busy season, I would like to see if there's any feedback in how I can have those volunteers participate in that decision making when I have another person also assisting with that decision making process as well. Is that possible? I'm not too sure if that question is clear.
So what I hear you asking, Alexandra, is how would people engage other volunteers in helping you make a decision when you also have a counterpart who that decision has to be made with? Is that what I hear correctly?
Yes, because from what I know is that Vista members can't do direct service. And I'm not too sure that how that intertwines or how that works when it comes to the decision-making process when it comes to volunteers.
Okay. Can you repeat that last part? Something about direct service? I want to make sure I got that clear.
Yes, from what I know is that I'm a Vista member that we can't do direct service. And with that decision-making process, how can I vet those volunteers when it comes to those situations? I just want to make sure I have everything clear and that I can move forward in having a clearer picture and implementing it in my volunteer program.
Okay. So how can you have volunteers engage in decision making when you're sharing that decision making with another leader?
Mm-hmm.
And also, how do you involve yourself because you can't do direct service? Is that the clarification?
Yes, that's
Okay.
correct. Uh-huh.
All right, I'm trying to type that in the chat. So for those of you who have heard what she said, feel free to raise your hand. I'm trying to write it in the chat so we can all mull over it. Okay.
That has been kind of a little confusion and a little roadblock for me.
Mhm. So it's how can you facilitate the decision-making
Yes.
process when you can't do direct service yourself?
Yes, that's correct. And
All
I'm
right,
not
anybody who has anything for Alexandra, you can raise your hand or drop it in the chat.
and I'm not sure if anybody else is in the same position as well.
You have any hands, Gretchen? All right, so how to have volunteers to engage in decision-making when the decision is shared between leaders, and how to facilitate decision-making process when I can't do direct service. So those are the two things that Alexandra. All right, so someone asked a clarifying question: with forming an advisory council consisting of volunteers help?
Yes.
Okay. All right, other ideas, keep them coming. So we've got advisory council so far.
Oh, yes, that's right.
Look at that. All right, keep them ideas coming. All right, Alexandra, I'm from another world. So what does it mean that you can't do direct service? Just so I gain some new understanding myself.
For more understanding, as a Vista member, I can't be hands-on when it comes to activities. And that has been a little a roadblock for me when when I have the heart and I want to be, and give a helping hand, give a helping hand and help and be there for my volunteers. And I'm there, but that has been one thing that's been kind of confusing in my part.
Okay, good. So a question was asked, can the other decision-making person do direct service? Alexandra,
I'm sorry.
can the other decision-making person do direct service?
Yes, as a
Yes, they
volunteer.
can. Okay, so that helps you out. All right. There's a suggestion to have everybody meet and talk. And then there's a suggestion to have clear goals established between the leaders as a starting point. So meeting with your person who can do direct service to talk about what the goals are in bringing volunteers in to support either decisions that have to be made or decisions that have been made that are going to impact them. Any other suggestions on the table? All right, so while we're waiting for people to think, one of the things that this process does is it gives you a very structured way of putting out their problem, getting some concrete solutions, and then you mulling through those solutions and making a decision, and then thinking about how do I then go back? So we've engaged everybody who's in the space today. You're going to give some explanation once you've taken one of our suggestions, and then you're going to give some, expectations you have for yourself moving forward. But if you were doing this with a group, you would have everybody who's going to be impacted by that decision kind of feed in. So I'm going to pause here because I don't see any more things chopping in the chat. Gretchen, did you get any hands? If not, I'm going to invite Alexandria to kind of think about the 4 or 5 suggestions she got. Oh, wait, one just came in. Let's see. Darlene says, I think it's important as a volunteer engagement to determine the value of volunteers and what the vision of leadership is to engage them in decision making. So really thinking about how you want to envision how volunteers will fit into the space. Thank you so much, Darlene. All right, so we have 4 or 5 suggestions. Alexandra, if you can take a few moments and think about one of those you want to pursue. And then what would that mean for what you would have to do next? And then you'll just share with us your final decision and what your next steps are based on that final decision. So we'll give you a few minutes. If anybody has any other suggestions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. And then what we're going to do is spend some time after Alexandra shares, just thinking about how you would use this process, everybody, how you envision using this process. Because this is one you could use with volunteers. This is one you can use with staff. All right, Alexandra, whenever you're ready, you can let us know which one of the suggestions you're going to try and what your next steps will be.
Yes, so actually, I would use all of them. The reason being why is because when it comes to Indigenous practices and restorative justice, back then we would have advisory councils where everybody would have to make those firm decisions as a collective when it came to Indigenous tribal communities. And having those clear goals be established between the leaders, and have every volunteer engage with everyone and then go on and so forth through the participant, sorry,
It's okay.
participatory decision-making fair process practice, and then go down through that framework with those questions.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And thank you again for volunteering.
Thank you.
I wish I knew how to send virtual gifts. I definitely would send them to you right now. All right. So I want to open it up to everybody else. In what ways do you see yourself applying this kind of fair process, engage, explain, expectation, clarity in your work, either with staff or with volunteers? And you can drop that in the chat. Or you can raise your hand and share out, whichever one works for you. All right, Gretchen, we got any? This will be a great way to explore a perceived or real volunteer issue with staff. I like that. Yeah, because once you make the decision, you'll hear some things you might not have heard had you not even opened up the discussion. Thanks, Gretchen. Any other hands, comments? All right, I always go into a meeting with an agenda, know what my goals are, and guide the discussion. Good. And working with teams who engage to make informed decisions. Good. Using it during advisory council, volunteer focus groups, make decisions and solve problems. Again, what I really like about the structure of this is it kind of eliminates, if you stick to the focus, it kind of eliminates that tendency we do to go down rabbit holes because you're very focused. This is the decision. I want to hear everybody's solutions. I'm going to make, I'm going to mull through them. I'm going to find a final decision, and then I'm going to do next steps. And what also I liked was that, you could state those steps and why. All right, good. So somebody has some plan to use it with their volunteer advisory council. Great. Other ways you would use it. Yep. So preparing volunteers in advance. So even once you know sites you're going to place volunteers at, this might be a good process. Here's the decision. All 5 of you are going to this site. And let's talk about that and let people kind of share. As a teacher, I remember trying to recruit kids to go to a certain junior high, and I was told by parents, no, that's not, the neighborhood I want my kid to go to. And so it would have been nice to kind of, if I knew about restorative back then, to kind of, okay, well, give me some things that need to happen because this is a really good junior high, even though it's not located in the best place, but really being able to open up that discussion and that solution-oriented process to get parents to understand. So I think about that when I think about what's in the chat. You put it at the end of the meeting. Good. But sometimes, Gerard, if you give people that timer, they tend to stay more on track. So for this, I tend to use like, okay, you got 3 minutes to give us this, 10 minutes to give us this, and then we're going to move on if you have a group that tends to kind of go off track and struggles with the process. All right, any other thoughts? All right. So one of the important things, thank you everybody for sharing, is that a part of fair process is also that opportunity to reflect. So we reflected on how people thought they would use the process. The other thing I want to do is I want to show you how at the end of a process to get people to reflect on either how they function in a meeting, a process, and in this case, we're going to talk about the webinar. So I'm going to do a quick reflection circle. So I'm going to open with this. We're going to try to chat again, see if it'll take the stuff I want. Hold on real quick. See if I can drop these prompts in here. I don't know why it's doing it. Okay, let me switch something and see if that. Nope. Okay. I don't know, Gretchen, why it won't let me drop things in the chat, but here we go. Okay, so here's the opening. If people stand in a circle long enough, they'll eventually begin to dance. And that's a quote by George Carlin. So for our first round, what I'd like to invite people to do, either you can raise your hand or you can unmute and share one part of your participation today in the webinar that you are most proud of. So one part of your participation today in the webinar that you are most proud of. And you can drop that in the chat or you can unmute, raise your hand and Gretchen will unmute you. All right. Anybody raising hands, Gretchen?
I don't see any yet, but I
Okay.
think we've got Alexandra has put in the chat and Bronwyn has also put in there. Thank you, guys. Thanks for your feedback.
Yes, it can be hard online. Thank you so much. All right, anybody else? Something you appreciate, so one part of your participation you are most proud of. All right, so you can keep those coming. The next prompt is share something you have appreciated about today's learning. So something you appreciated. Good. Volunteering to share and gaining the information. Thank you, Arlette. All right, share something you appreciated about today's learning is our next prompt. So raise your hand or unmute your, or drop it in the chat. Sorry, I appreciate the handout. Thank you, Elise. Openness, good. Tools to take away. Yes. Good, I'm glad you found it practical. Good. All right, so here is our last prompt, time and knowledge for you both. Thank you, thank you. All right, here is our last one. Share something you can do based on today's learning. Something you can do based on today's learning. Thank you, Alex, for enjoying the handout. So you can raise your hand or drop in the chat something you can do based on today's learning. Yes, intentionality. Stranger no more, good. And that will be on the PowerPoint, that's on the PowerPoint. Good. Making volunteers feel more involved overall, the handout. Working with groups. Yes, that focus on being proactive. You can stop so many things if you just had a discussion up front. Oh, that's right, Gerard. Take them tools and use them right away. All right. Just keep dropping things in the chat. And here is our closing. So without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. And that's Margaret Wheatley. And I'm going to read that one more time. Without reflection, we go blindly on our way, creating more unintended consequences and failing to achieve anything useful. So that is one of the important things that we need to remember, is that we need to also reflect. So after we do everything, we reflect on it so that we can check that what we intended to do, because intention is sometimes different from outcome, is what has occurred. And it also will spark us on who we might need to follow up with and say, hey, what was that like for you? All right. So I'd like to thank everybody for your time today and open it up for any questions. If you have any questions that pop up for later, my email is up there, circles@gardenofreading.org. So if there are any questions, just raise your hand and drop them in the chat.
Nikki, I really like that quote about reflection, and it's so easy to forget to do that piece. And it probably not practical to do every time, but especially when you're doing something as important as this, where people are really asked to put themselves out there. Yeah, Maura, great comment. She's added 15. Oh, that's brilliant. Um, just scheduling an extra 15 minutes to just kind of reflect. I think that's something I need to do. I am gonna do that for a couple of meetings that I have, because my brain is just so full by the end, and I try not to schedule anything for right after because I do need time to process, but that that process is so helpful.
Yeah, and then also I find inviting other people to reflect. So even if I send out a survey afterwards that says, hey, what was that like for you to experience that? Is there anything more you needed, less of this? It's always helpful. So I'm going to try to type the quote in the chat. Just give me 1 minute and I'll get that for you. All right. Questions, comments? I'm typing this in the chat.
While Nikki is doing that, I will just follow up and say that we originally had planned for this to be a 90-minute webinar, but I think because of the smaller group and we didn't do the breakouts, we're giving you the gift of a half an hour back to your time. So you can actually maybe schedule a little reflection to maybe go through the handout some more. And this might be something that maybe to listen through the recording again when you can. I will have this up in the members only side, and just probably, hopefully I can get to that tomorrow. But again, for those of you, I don't see very many, but for those of you that are not Alive members, just want to put that out there as encourage you to take advantage of these free Alive Academies every month, as well as some great networking and professional development opportunities. And that quote is really great. And just go
Yeah.
blindly on our way, because I was reading an article the other day about people are really suffering from meeting burnout. And there's so many meetings, there's not time to do the work, the things.
Yeah,
And
we have a norm at my job where meetings can't be longer than 45 minutes.
yeah, yeah. That's I think that is it's a really good thing to get used to if you can. And I know at one organization I worked at, when way before Zoom was a thing, they would do stand-up meetings, and people didn't want to stand there for a long time. They'd bring
So they
donuts
talk
to get
real
you there.
fast.
But yeah, and nobody would be like going on and on, because people were like, oh, I'm ready to sit down. I need to go do my work or whatever. So
Yeah,
All
yeah.
right.
So it's really important to like put all of these things as part of how you institutionally work. So
Mhm.
people feel the freedom for reflection, they feel the freedom to connect and join with each other because it's part of the norm of how you do things.
Absolutely. And I think it takes, there's so many instances for us as volunteer engagement professionals, we can really help set that tone and set that example, to the volunteers, with the staff, for everybody. And, it may take some practice to get to that point, but when you were talking earlier about a mentor, I always think about my junior year history teacher and just how great she was. And although there was usually a lot of discord in the world around us because it was the 70s, but she was always very calm and serene, and I don't know how she did it. Well, maybe now I do, but back then as a teenager, I was like, I don't know how she can not be freaking out about what's happening. So, if there are no other questions or comments, we'll end just a few minutes early and give you this time back for reflection.
Thank
So
you, everybody, for spending time with me. It was great. An email with any questions that you have, needs for training. Thank you so much.
thank you, Nikki. It was a pleasure to have you kick off our year and just a real joy to listen to you and get to know you better. So sending you all the good vibes and
Thank you.
have a great rest of the week, everyone. And we will see you hopefully next month at the next Alive Academy. Bye.